They threaten us directly or with veiled threats. Of course, we respond as we should. They always take examples. They will tell us, Thomas Sankara tried to do it like this, but where is he? He is dead. Such a person ruled like this, he is in prison. All this to try to scare us, to make us cowards. I think they haven't understood something. The Haitian president, he tried to do it like this. Where is he? He is dead. Gaddafi tried like this. Where is he? He is dead. These are the veiled statements made to us to instill fear.
In September 2022, the world barely noticed when Ibrahim Traoré walked into power. But for Burkinabè citizens, it was the beginning of a new story, one of struggle, sacrifice, and determination to reclaim dignity taken generations ago. From the moment he forced French troops out, each step has been like a chapter in a hero's journey, nationalizing resources, forging new alliances, and daring to cut ties to the CFA franc. This isn't just politics, it's the tale of a nation finding its voice after decades of silence.
When we speak, or when we have the opportunity to be in certain situations abroad, we often make statements to call on African heads of state to wake up, take care of our youth. But I can assure you, youth, that when we find ourselves in their corridors, these same heads of state tell us, you are on the right track. This is what needs to be done for Africa to feel empowered. From this platform, I would like to say that African people are the most peaceful people. When you recognize the wrong, you must tell the people.
Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. What would drive a young leader to stand before his nation and demand that one of the most powerful countries in the world leave within just 1 month? In January 2023, Ibrahim Traoré did exactly that, shocking not only France, but the entire international community. At that moment, Burkina Faso was dependent on French troops and intelligence to face a growing jihadist insurgency. Villages were under siege, roads became unsafe, and millions lived in fear of attacks that had displaced entire communities. France had positioned itself as indispensable, yet here was a 34-year-old captain saying their chapter in Burkina Faso was over. He gave them 30 days to pack up and leave. To understand the weight of that decision, imagine the stakes hanging in the balance. Foreign specialists managed air surveillance, drones, and advanced infrastructure the Burkinabè army did not have. French soldiers had been on the ground for years, providing support that many nations in the Sahel considered vital. Without that backing, the risk was enormous. Analysts in European capitals whispered predictions of collapse. Editors wrote headlines about reckless leadership.
Our children will ask us questions. Imagine if in Burkina we refuse to fight, and we accept to submit to live in slavery. And the imperialists have understood. They try to instill fear in the leaders so that you become cowards. Because when you are a coward, all other vices can arise. Tomorrow our children will grow up. They will ask questions. Were our parents cowards to leave us in slavery? Whether we are alive or dead, we will feel it.
Western commentators asked if Traoré had doomed the country from within. To them, it looked like a political gamble driven by pride rather than strategy. But inside Burkina Faso, the tone was radically different. In Ouagadougou cafes, students celebrated the announcement as if it were the final whistle of a victory in football. Workers in markets described it as an act of dignity, a moment that gave back strength after years of humiliation. Older generations compared the gesture to the fight for independence decades earlier. It wasn't simply about security, it was about who had the right to decide the fate of the country. Traoré captured that sentiment when he reminded the world that France itself would not exist without the blood and labor of African ancestors. That statement, repeated across radios and television screens, resonated beyond Burkina Faso. From Lagos to Dakar, Africans debated whether this was finally the leader who dared to say what others were too cautious to voice. The significance of this cannot be overstated, especially when compared to other leaders who faced similar choices but chose compromise.
How can you want to impose democracy by killing millions of people? That's dictatorship, that's not democracy. It can't be imposed. People kill their protesters, yet they call themselves Democrats, and we are labeled as coup plotters. Those who call themselves Democrats. But look, we've seen scenes where people were prevented from entering assemblies. We've seen scenes where forces stormed into assemblies to force the deputies to pass legislation.
Neighboring countries, alliances with France had become deeply entrenched, and even when protests erupted against French presence, governments often hesitated. Traoré's move stood out because it didn't come with negotiation or half measures. It was a line drawn firmly in the sand. He didn't ask politely nor bargain for gradual withdrawal. He imposed a deadline and refused to extend it. As the month ticked away, the world waited. Commentators forecast instability, predicting foreign investors would flee, aid packages would freeze, and violence would spread unchecked. Diplomats briefed their governments to prepare for the worst once the French convoys rolled back across the border. Yet when the deadline arrived and French troops departed, the feared collapse never came. Instead, Burkina Faso sought out new partnerships, reaching toward allies who spoke less of conditions and more of cooperation. The move demonstrated that a country long thought too fragile could still dictate its own terms. This single act inspired movements across Africa, with young activists pointing to Burkina Faso as living proof that sovereignty was not just rhetoric, but a policy that could be enacted. And then there was the line to France that left diplomats speechless, a reminder that the very existence of their republic was tied to African hands and African sacrifice. It wasn't framed as revenge, but as a cold truth that history could not erase. The echo of that statement still lingers, carrying a weight that extended far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Yet even as France's shadow receded, Traoré knew the harder fight still awaited. For if expelling a foreign army tested political courage, the battle over Burkina Faso's wealth would demand even more. Burkina Faso is one of Africa's leading producers of gold, yet its villages remain scarred by poverty. Its children walk to school without shoes, and most of the wealth from its soil flows far beyond its borders. Gold worth billions has left the country every year, but few in Ouagadougou or the rural communities that pulled it from the ground have benefited. For decades, contracts favored multinational corporations. Companies imported their machines, exported their ore, and left little behind except dust, pits, and promises. The government collected taxes, small compared to the profits, while ordinary people saw their country's treasure vanish before their eyes. The problem went deeper than unfair deals. Abidjan, London, and Toronto hosted fancy offices of mining giants that shaped the price of Burkina Faso's gold, while villages near the mines lacked running water. Smuggling also thrived. Small-scale miners dug through night and day, selling to traders who moved the gold across borders illegally, draining away billions that could have funded schools or hospitals. Everyone knew this was happening, yet few dared to confront it. After all, how could one of the world's poorest nations challenge financial networks, commodities markets, and global corporations guarded by layers of legal and political shields? That was the dilemma. Could Burkina Faso, already weakened by war and isolation, declare independence in the economic field too? Kicking out France had been visible. This battle was less dramatic to the outside eye, but even more dangerous. Where soldiers could be seen leaving, financiers and traders operated invisibly. They could punish with sanctions, lawsuits, and frozen accounts. Some argued it was better to compromise, to take what little was offered rather than risk everything. Traoré refused. In November 2023, the government inaugurated the first state-owned gold refinery. For the first time, gold would not leave the country as raw ore, loaded onto cargo planes for processing overseas. Instead, Burkina Faso would refine its own bars, creating value at home. The sight of those freshly minted bars marked a symbolic turning point. Commentators in the region spoke of a new era where Africans might hold their own reserves, not just ship them abroad. The changes quickened. In February 2024, the government suspended the export permits of small-scale miners. Officials argued that much of the gold was leaving unofficially, robbing the nation of revenue. By tightening control, Traoré aimed to stop smugglers and widen state revenue for public services. To outside critics, it looked like stifling private initiative. Inside the country, it was hailed as protecting a leaking pot finally being patched by its rightful owner. Foreign analysts called it reckless, warning capitals that investors would flee, aid would shrink, and international courts would clamp down. Within Burkina Faso, the story was told differently. Market traders said this was justice long overdue. Teachers saw new hope for salaries. For farmers struggling in rural areas, the promise of roads, schools, and clinics built from their country's gold sounded like common sense. Traoré's rise shows that Burkina Faso's struggle is larger than its borders. It is part of Africa's demand to control its own destiny, to move beyond systems designed elsewhere and imposed without choice. Each decision he made carried a message. Sovereignty is not symbolic, it must be lived through action. If a small, war-scarred country can resist pressure from global powers, what might happen if larger African nations turn the same way? The trials are far from over, but one truth is clear: this is no longer silence. Africa has begun to speak with its own voice.